Live from Santa Monica, California, it is another live episode of Moving Past Trauma. Mover Nation, what's going on? Happy Wellness Wednesday. I have a fantastic guest. She is someone who I discovered on Instagram probably about a year ago, and I'm very excited to have her on the program. Yes, it is Dr. Jamie Zuckerman, or as she's known, Dr. Z. Well, we're going to talk a lot about narcissism because she specializes in that. I'm going to read off her CV here in a second, but she's going to have a lot of great insight for y'all and for myself as well. I was really pleased to have her on the program not too long ago on Survivor Squad, and that episode will come out later. We're going to talk about, she's watched my documentary a few times, and she has also just been a really fantastic cheerleader for those who are struggling with mental health issues. This is Moving Past Trauma Live. I'm your host, Collier Landry, and let's get into it.
Testimony continued today in the most notorious criminal trial in...
When I was 12 years old, my testimony sent my father to prison for murdering my mother. This podcast serves as a type of therapy and reconciliation for myself, and it is my hope that it helps anyone who has experienced deception, betrayal, and dark trauma. I'm Collier Landry, and this is Moving Past Trauma.
We have had a big week in the true crime world, as y'all know. Lori Vallow was finally sentenced. Frustrating for me, and I think frustrating for everybody that was participating or was watching, whether in the courtroom or watching online. There was a lot of issues with, her lack of accountability, which I'm going to talk a little bit about with Dr. Z. Here she is. All right, so I'm going to read off her CV because she has quite an impressive CV if you guys do not know her. So my guest today is Dr. Jamie Zuckerman, or Dr. Z, as she is known by her moniker online. She is a national expert in narcissistic abuse and a licensed clinical psychologist with a specialization in treating adults dealing with anxiety and mood disorders. Moreover, she is a highly sought-after relationship coach, catering to both men and women across the nation who have experienced or are currently experiencing narcissistic abuse in various relationship settings. Dr. Z is also the proud owner of the Z Group, a therapy practice that focuses on helping adults cope with mood disorders, anxiety, relationship challenges, and the everyday stresses of life. So honestly, I think Dr. Z could help all of us with her specialties. So I am pleased and honored to welcome to the program, Dr. Jamie Zuckerman.
I'm so sorry.
No worries.
My God, it never ends.
No worries. Usually I'm the one that sends the wrong link to people, so I'm glad that it wasn't
no,
me.
I you don't even want it. I logged into the link that everybody else is on watching right now.
Oh, that's so funny. So were you watching, so you weren't watching yourself, but you were watching me intro you.
Correct.
That's too funny. That's too funny. Well, thank you for figuring out the technical difficulties. It's fantastic. So I was giving a little bit of your CV earlier. One thing I didn't mention, which is probably my favorite part of your CV, is you're from Philadelphia.
I am.
Same as me.
Yes, I am. Born and raised, and then came back.
Born, raised, and came back.
Yep.
Yes. And at the end of the program, we'll do some rapid fire questions, and we'll find out who is the ultimate cheesesteak place for you. But amongst other things, but I was explaining to the audience. Tara Newell and I interviewed you on Survivor Squad, and you were kind enough to join this live. One of the things you said to me, one of the things you said to me that was very flattering was that you had seen my film, and that you had also messaged me and said, "Hey, I watched it again, by the way." So thank you for that. Your specialty lies in narcissistic abuse and dealing with patients who are sort of recovering from those relationships, whether they be with a spouse, a romantic relationship or parental, and help them really navigate that. So what I want to play some stuff from the film to get your sort of assessment, but why don't you tell everyone what you do and how you came into this work?
Sure. So like you said, I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I have a practice in Philadelphia, but I also do a lot of relationship coaching, particularly in the area of narcissistic abuse. So I help people who are either currently in a narcissistic abusive relationship, whether it's a parent, whether it's a significant other, friends, siblings, and I help them navigate that relationship, whatever that looks like for them. And I also help people who are on the other side, which we call post-separation abuse, who are struggling with kind of what happens after that separation. Because unfortunately, in these types of relationships, the abuse and the trauma, it doesn't just end once the relationship ends. So there's a lot of need for, a lot of therapy and work even after you have removed yourself from the relationship. I can't hear you.
There we go. Of course you can, because it was muted for whatever reason. This is just, we're fantastic technical difficulties.
We're good today.
We're batting 1,000. We're as good as the Phillies are this year, right? But not as bad as the Mets. Baseball talk for those of you that may not know. No, in all seriousness, you must be quite busy, because this is just, I think in a post-pandemic world, a lot of people are discovering what these personality traits are and how they affect them.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's something that definitely, and I think we had talked about this during the lockdown, during the pandemic, when people couldn't leave their homes. Yeah. Forget normal stress of losing your job and having money issues and your children home, and now you need to teach them things, and you're not equipped to be a teacher. And so all of these things were happening regardless. Substance abuse was on the rise, and with that also domestic violence increased considerably because of all the stress of the increase in substance abuse, but also because there was no escape. People going to work oftentimes is, an escape from the abuse they get at home. So they were home a lot with their abusive partner. And really all they had was social media to turn to for help. And I think that that's where I saw a huge benefit from people going on social media, survivors sharing stories. I always say the best support you can possibly get are stories from people who have gone through similar situations. Hear their stories, hear the hope, and hear how they got to the other side of things. But I really did see this just, unfortunately, just kind of blow up during the pandemic, and then continues to.
So do you think well, a couple of things. So one of the things that I struggled with my entire life, and since you've seen my film, we can totally talk about this, but one of the things that I really struggle with my father, I mean, you've seen the film. Would you say that my father suffers from narcissistic personality disorder?
Without treating him personally, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I know you can't give a clinical. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think he also kind of borders on that sociopathic end of things as well, given what happened.
Yeah, and just the lack of remorse and things like that. But one of the things that I always grew up with, and I get a lot of questions about it through the podcast, but also just in life, just me growing up with people and then finding out what my story was. Is something like this hereditary?
So there's research on kind of that, and also the development, your developmental years and what you witness and things like that. So there is research that suggests that it is hereditary. There is research that suggests that there are brain differences. But then again, it begs the question, does your brain change as a result of your behaviors? Kind of what comes first? Majority of the research that I kind of gravitate towards is that it's really kind of a product of your environment. And children, when we go through our upbringing, we develop strategies, right? We develop strategies to manage our day-to-day, to get through life. And so when you're dealing with parents who are neglectful or, deal with substance abuse, with inconsistent emotions, withhold and love and withhold and love, and kind of get that back and forth, or physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, this coercive abuse that we talk about. when they are a part of that, children develop strategies to be able to survive, to get through life. And what happens is those strategies, as you get through life, either you kind of adjust them as you get through life and you are no longer in that context anymore. Therefore, you don't need to use all of those strategies in the same way. And they should be malleable. But if you get to a point where they don't work anymore, but yet you're continuing to use them because it's familiar, because it's what you know, because maybe, I stand by this, and you actually, this is one of the things in your film that I want to point out to people, because I know that a lot of people have questions of like, oh, well, if my parent was a narcissist, am I going to become a narcissist? Or my kid's going to be a narcissist? I cannot stress enough the importance of having one healthy parent. And you had your mom. The benefit of having a healthy parent, one stable, healthy parent, is so important, because that's all you really need. Now, I'm not saying you're not going to be affected, obviously, by the things you see and by the way you're treated by the other parent, but having that one healthy, stable parent does so much for a child. It gives them that foundation. It gives them that base that they otherwise wouldn't have had.
That's really interesting. I mean, obviously, it must have.
And you
worked.
also had consistent supports throughout too. You had a lot of, you were very fortunate in the sense that when you were put into a family, you really kind of found your place with them. And I think that you also had the benefit of that stability as well. And I kind of include that in that stable parent, even though they weren't, actually your parents.
Sure. I do think, and there's a lot of things that are not really talked about in the film, but there was definitely the foster care situation with my foster parents had a lot of abuse and neglect and manipulation as well. So it was like that was on top. So and I've not really talked about this a lot, so this is probably the first time I'm really sharing this, but one of the things that when I went to the Zigglers, who I was awarded to, who you see in the film, like you're supposed to ease into a household as like going from foster care. You spend a day, then you have a dinner, and then you get maybe a weekend, and then maybe after a couple months you kind of go into the home. I went over there, I met them. The next thing, it was like I was going to stay the night, which then led into 2 nights, and then I just said, "Can I just go get the rest? Can I just go get the rest of my shit? And stay here?" Because it was so bad in foster care. I was like, I don't care. I really don't care how this works out right now, but this is so bad from where I'm coming from that I need I'm just gonna rip the Band-Aid.
But to advocate for yourself at that age within the foster system, going what you've gone through is just amazing.
Yeah, I think I was just, and I think the thing is I was just like really tired of it. And I do talk a lot, and I probably don't talk enough about it. Because I'm just, as I slowly get into like this podcast and really sharing my story, and there's so many layers to this onion, I don't discuss the issues with the foster care system, which is kids are abused, and kids are abused far more than I was. Kids are neglected. Families are taking in foster care children just to profit.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then you throw in the wonderful stew of the opioid epidemic and poverty, and it's corruption, what have you. There's a lot of issues that go to that. And I realize, again, how fortunate I was, and how for some reason I was advocating for myself despite these adult figures. But I had been dealing with the adult nonsense in my life for so long, because with so obviously my father, and then my mother is gone, then my mother's family abandoning me, and then my father's side of the family abandoning me and saying, "You're going to rescind your testimony, you were coached." And I'm like, I didn't imagine hearing him kill her. I didn't imagine his behavior it's not like she disappeared and I didn't know what happened. Like I heard it happen, and for 25 days I helped an investigator investigate it and find the clues to find her body.
You were one of the how old were you again?
So I was 11. Testified? So I was 11 when it happened, and 12 when it went to trial. So I was almost 12 when it happened.
So my son I figured it was around that age. My son just turned 11. I cannot fathom him having the ability to navigate that. And the fact that you were able to get up and testify, and the way you spoke, I know people must tell you this all the time, because it was so like, just even the second time I watched it, I was just kind of like, oh my, like, wow, the way you speak and the way you articulate things, it was unbelievable, given what was also going on, and you know, how you must have been feeling and what you were going through. And yet you were able to do what you did. Again, is just unbelievable.
Well, thank you.
My son is allowed, like I said, he can't even, like, he doesn't even know what day it is. Like, he could never, like, he couldn't articulate like that. It was just amazing.
Well, I think that also, I mean, thank you. That's a wonderful compliment. I think the thing that also is frustrating about that is people look at this and they go, oh, well, you know, you were obviously coached. They told you what to say. Obviously this, I was like, do you understand how difficult it is to get up? I just had to give a deposition in a lawsuit not too long ago. And I said to the lawyer, I said, this is like, I'm just the wrong person to have here, because I have such a memory and attention to detail, which is why my father's incarcerated, because I remember everything. Mm-hmm. And I said, you know, but even then it was jarring for me. I was having a lot of anxiety, and I just, to be able to stare down your abuser, and I'm not, that didn't happen in the lawsuit, but I'm saying in the courtroom, like my father, who was my abuser, who took the life of my mother, to stare them down and to think that somehow you can memorize some sort of script that someone told you that you need to say in these particular, I'm like, that's utterly fanciful. Like, that's pure rubbish. Like, you can't, like, it's so difficult to even remember what day it is when you're sitting in the witness box. Yeah. So I think I was just a really angry kid. Like, you're not going to get away with this. Not like angry at life, but angry at him. Like, you're not going to get away with this. Mm-hmm. Or you're like, I'm going to die. I'm going to die on this hill if I make, making sure that you get what you deserve. Which is, I guess part of it. Well, I get, you said your son, and so maybe I was just like some miracle baby or whatever, just a special kid. I mean, I think a lot of it is because my mother treated me like an adult growing up. Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of people, after they had seen the film, said, hey, we want to talk to you about how you were the way you were. Do you realize this is because of how your mother raised you? She didn't baby talk you. She made you. And I was like, I think to myself, I thought she was kind of being mean a lot.
Yeah, no, I get that. I mean, I was an only child, and my mom treated me like I was an adult. I did very adult things. I spoke very adult-like. And it was, in retrospect, it probably seemed odd, a little bit, because I don't think I probably presented as a, like, the kind of stereotypical kid, because I knew things, for better or worse, I don't know, but I knew things. I could talk about things. I traveled a lot with it. So I get that. I understand that. And I think that's why I'm saying, I think it makes a very big difference when you have that one parent. And I'm sure that her treating you like an adult was, there's probably a lot of reasons behind that. I think she needed you in some way to know what was going on, because it sounded like she was aware that this was a distinct possibility. And I think that she was kind of making you able to care for yourself in a way.
Yeah, I can remember being a kid and calling the school to ask how to boil water because I wanted to make macaroni and cheese. I'm like, do you put salt in it? Because my mom said put salt in it. Yep. And like, but I mean, my mother's a cook, and so I remember doing that. But I just kind of, that's interesting about the healthy parent. So if you do have a healthy parent, things can look up, like that one parent stepping up and being the support system for the child. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not just the support system. It's the parent that gives you a schedule. It's the parent that is the voice of reason. It's the parent that that you can go to if you need to. It's the parent you can be most vulnerable with, who's consistent. Like that, it's the consistency of the healthy parent that is really important. Knowing what you're going to get, not needing to walk on eggshells, knowing what behaviors result in what consequences. It's not arbitrary. It's not based in manipulation, and it's just really important to have that structure and that ability for a child to predict what comes next. Like, you probably with your mom knew exactly what came next with every situation. It was very structured for you. And that's what children crave. That's why when you have parents who get divorced and one parent is a narcissist, when the children come home from the narcissist's house or wherever they're staying, the stable, healthy parent, let's say, the non-abusive partner, ends up having to kind of really just reset the children, because they come back from this really tumultuous, emotionally dysregulated household, and then they come back to the stable parent. Imagine that parent was equally as unpredictable and emotionally abusive, physically abusive. Then you don't know which end is up, but you know that if you go back to that house, you kind of have to recalibrate. They recalibrate you in a way, and they, to send you back again at some point, unfortunately, but they have the ability to reground you. And that is huge, because even if it's a really difficult upbringing, you knew that, you knew that you had that one parent to go to that would make things predictable again for you. And there's comfort in that. And children need that. They thrive on structure. They need it.
Is there a predictability with well, that's great intel, by the way. Thank you for sharing that. Mm-hmm. Is there predictability on the flip side with like a, not necessarily an abusive parent, but let's say you have a dad that's an alcoholic, right? And you got to constantly take care of them. Mm-hmm. I think about, I mean, I don't want to bust anybody out, but I've had friends, I have people in my life who had alcoholic parents, right? And they're pretty well grounded themselves. They're not drinkers. They're not, but there was this like burden of responsibility with them and their brothers or sisters. Like, okay, dad's drunk again, so we got to take care of them. And yeah, they have problems. They have issues like we all do. But like there was that consistency that they knew it was a Thursday. Dad was going to be drunk and passed out. Is that also the flip side of this, that consistency? It's really the consistency of it. So it's predictable.
Well, I think with that, the consistency of it is still not within your control, right? Like, you still don't know how dad's going to be, you still have that, it's predictable, but it's not within your control. So it's like this illusion of control, right? And children oftentimes rely on that illusion of control because sometimes that's all they have. So I think I think what you're talking about is more of a survival strategy that the child or the children develop in order to just get through it. But I don't think that's the kind of structure that results in healthy development. That's more of a survival strategy that they figured out that on Thursdays this happens, so we need to do this, or we need to go to a friend's house, or we need to ignore him on Thursdays. I mean, that's more survival. That's not necessarily healthy structure.
Yeah, good to point that out. Good to point that out. I didn't mean to suggest that. Somebody had said they love the photos of my mom that I share, so I just kind of put one up to the camera if they can.
She was so beautiful, and she really was so well put together.
She really was. Yeah. She really was. I don't know what happened over here, but at least with the well put together part. Kidding. But no, in all seriousness, yeah, I guess it is that survival mechanism. They always say that children are so resilient. Is that true, or do you? I don't know how long you've been doing this work for. How long have you been doing this work for?
Since 2007 or 6.
So about like 15, 16, 17 years. Are you seeing, with the prominence or the rise in social media, are you seeing that children, and not speaking of your own children, but children in general, and I'm sure you deal with them, are becoming less and less resilient and more reliant on certain things around them? I don't have any children, so I'm asking this as a
yeah. I mean, so do I think children? Okay, so I actually don't. So social media is a whole separate issue. I think there's a lot of actual brain changes that are taking place in children. I think that they're way less patient. They're so used to immediate results, and so I think I would imagine, I mean, and I see it in my own kids, the ability to sit with and tolerate discomfort, the ability to be bored, which is a skill, and not need to do something right away to get rid of it. I think you're going to see a rise in anxiety, because I think children, what ends up happening is they're so used to that quick fix, getting what they need on social media and the way the way it's developed in general. I know there's a huge increase in mental health in children because of things like that. Forget the bullying and the self-comparison aspect of social media, but just cognitively, the way, it works on your brain is definitely showing an increase in anxiety and depression. Now, as far as do I think children are more or less resilient, I think one, it depends on the temperament of the child. And I think it depends on the environment they're in. What I will say, though, is that I do think that parents in general, there's this concept called psychological immunity. I can't take credit for it, but it's fascinating, because one of the things that started happening was I would see these college students, right? Or like these 18-year-olds just going to college, and they would come into my office and they were absolutely paralyzed with anxiety, paralyzed. And you would expect the level of anxiety that they had. And they had actually done, there was a whole article on this too. This isn't just my observations, but you would expect their family to have been just totally dysregulated, so unhealthy, and just a recipe for intense anxiety. And what people were finding was these children actually came from pretty, as normal as, I don't even know what normal is anymore, but healthy, right? Like healthy families that even if there was tension or dysfunction, shouldn't have resulted in that level of anxiety and depression. And what people started realizing through research was that and it's more likely a generational thing than not, but what parents were doing was depriving their children during their upbringing of being able to learn how to self-regulate their emotions on their own. Meaning they had no psychological immunity. So they get to college or they leave their house and something happens emotionally, let's say, they don't know how to handle it and they just crash. So for example, these parents would, if the child got in trouble at school, or if the child had a fight with their friends, parents pick up the phone, handle the situation for them, because the parent themselves is so uncomfortable with seeing their child uncomfortable, which I completely get, right? The claws come out. I understand that fully. But it's a whole different thing to actually handle it for your child. Being there for them, yes, consistently, but handling it for them. Because what it does is a couple things. It sends a message to your child that as a parent, you don't think your child's capable of handling this. You're depriving them the opportunity to just feel like shit and figure out how to regulate their emotions and see that nothing bad happens from just feeling something. The bad stuff happens is when you act in service of trying to get rid of that icky stuff. So they were depriving children of this ability to regulate. And I think that that's what we see a lot of now, in addition to social media, right? So I think it's just this kind of, I don't know, perfect storm, so to speak. But yeah, I mean, and it's actually frowned upon when you're not like that. I was always called I was the mean mom. I was the mean mom. And it wasn't that I was the mean mom. I let my kids they knew I was there for them, but it's an important skill to learn, and they don't teach that in school. Why? I don't know. But they don't teach children how to regulate emotions in school.
Why is that?
Do you have like 5 hours?
I was going to say that is like opening a can of worms, I'm sure.
I think because there's still a stigma attached to it. I think people don't understand it. I think that, I think something that they feel like isn't academic, and therefore we're not going to teach it here. And I see there's a slow improvement with it, but I mean, for some reason, geometry is more important. I don't know. I mean, my son came home and they learned about something. I don't even know who this person was. I don't even know what it was. It was something that he will never, ever, 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 ever use. Ever. It was like, I don't even remember what it was, but it was something that was just so, because he's like, do I need to memorize? I'm like, honestly, it's never going to matter. I would much rather children know how to do that and regulate their emotions and teach them how to be mindful and teach them some strategies and skill sets than like, I don't even know, learn about different types of rocks. I mean, my 2 cents as a psychologist, but I think they just don't teach it. I don't think they think it's their responsibility. And I think they look at it as not academic.
So would you say though that like learning how to be bored and it's interesting you mentioned this because I literally pulled something up the other day, and I always take these little like quotes or tropes from social media people post, and I just like scan them and put them in like a little notepad right on my phone. And they were talking literally about boredom, like allowing kids to be bored.
Yep.
Allowing kids, do you think that this, like how does that, we obviously we probably really don't even know how this is affecting our people yet, our young people. I think maybe we're just starting to do that. Is that correct?
As far as children not learning how to be bored?
Oh yeah. As far as this constant, consistent, like gratification from social media.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know that it's rewiring brains. We know that it's changing chemicals. I mean, every time, like there's a reason why your email has a little red number, right? There's a reason on your phone why social media apps, you see again, the little red signal that you have, whatever, a message or something, but you have to actually go into the app to get it, right? And so there's a reason for that. It's these quick dopamine fixes, right? And so it makes you feel like you get that temporary rush and then it goes away. You temporary rush and it goes away. But that constant fluctuation can be really damaging. I mean, it's you're constantly seeking that out, which is why children, just to sit with discomfort is such a foreign concept to them, because they're so used to this, as you said, this immediate gratification on such an inconsistent interval. So if you think about it, if you take with substance abuse, right, it's that inconsistent model. It's kind of the same thing. It's this, which is the same thing with narcissistic abuse. It's this inconsistency, this intermittent reinforcement, we call it, where it's like you never know what you're going to get, and it's these quick fixes of dopamine and taken away, and there's no rhyme or reason for it. So it really just kind of keeps you guessing and always kind of hyper vigilant, and depriving children of the ability to just sit with it. Just sit. I mean, we feel it too. If I forget my phone, I feel absolutely 100% just completely off. I mean, I'll be honest. I cannot tolerate not having my phone on me. Even if I don't use it, I just feel completely out of sync.
It's interesting. You say that. I have my phone. I feel out of sync too without my phone because like my music is synced to it. So I'm always listening to music. And I actually was thinking the other day, I was like, what if I got like an old school iPod? I'm sure I have one somewhere, and started just carrying that around. So I'm not literally, because I don't like the phone in ways like, sometimes I'm just annoyed with people. I turn on airplane mode, and then people are like, why couldn't I get a hold of you? Why didn't the message go through? And I'm like, like Timothy Ferriss, he does all these videos, and he wrote 4 Hour Work Week and for all these, it's podcasts and whatever, it doesn't matter. But he's very famous in the world of self-productivity, right? And he talks about like you putting your phone on airplane mode while you're doing work, so nothing comes through, so no one bothers you, and it's like you almost feel guilty for doing that in a lot of ways. Yeah, like you're like what, like now people can't get a hold of me. Are they going to gonna be a knock on my door, like somebody's gonna come looking for me, or
Right.
what is that? I think it's very challenging to be a parent right now. And
I think it's just challenging period to be anything right now.
yeah, that's a good point.
You know what I mean? Like, I just think everything's harder right now.
Okay, so that leads me into my sort of next, and I don't know. Are you into true crime at all? Do you follow true crime stories and things?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't want to assume, so I didn't want to make a gender-based assumption, but
Nope. I am very, yeah. No.
So, do you think that these quick dopamine fixes, the rise of social media, the lack of being able to self-regulate and boredom and things like that, do you think that is sort of, and children, like you just were telling the story of a child's parents getting on the phone to regulate an interaction that they've had with a friend they've fallen out with, which is like the dumbest thing ever. Like, you have to learn how to handle this. But I do notice, I really haven't been on like major film sets in probably a couple of years due to the pandemic and things like that. Since probably like 2021. And just also with starting the podcast and things. But I do remember like dealing with younger actors and just seeing like a lot of, and these are social people, right? And they're out and about, but there was just this, sometimes there was just this social awkwardness that I was like, I don't want to feel like the old man, but I'm like, I didn't do that when I was that age. Like I would go talk to people, and I was very, learning and very much into discovery, where everything seems to be almost introverted, like, or introverted is probably the wrong word, more solipsistic than anything, with the social media and the likes and everything. So they're just in their own world and they don't know how to just have this physical interaction.
Yeah.
Do you think this can lead to rises in violence?
I don't know. I think it leads to increased impulsivity. I don't necessarily know if that channels directly into violence. Does it at some point? Yes, but that doesn't mean it always will. I mean, increased impulsive behavior could mean something like, driving erratically and the consequences of that, right? Or drug use, or eating too much, or just, being really careless when you're sending an email because, that kind of thing. So I think it can translate into a whole host of other things. I don't think it necessarily makes someone directly violent. I think there's a lot of other things involved in that, but I do think I know it increases impulsivity and poor judgment making. So is violence part of that? Yeah. I mean, yes, that could lead to increased violence for sure.
Well, yeah, because I'm wondering, because of this impulsivity, and then you have also this not feeling like heard or quote respected, or like, oh, you didn't validate my message, you didn't get back to me, they didn't get back to me right away. I saw they have a read receipt, I know they read it. I mean, I've been guilty of that. Been like, well, they got the read receipts turned on, like, what's going on? So I think that
that's a really good point. As with the text message aspect, I never looked at it like that, actually. That the impulse,
Well, it's almost like this entitlement.
I was just going to say entitlement. That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah. Yep. And
I think when I look at, situations of, like, what was the whole thing? Was it like at NYU, or was it some very prestigious school where all the kids got, nobody got an A, or everybody failed because the class was so hard, and the teacher was removed from the faculty for giving lower grades to these kids, and everyone was like, are you kidding me? And these parents complained because their kid didn't get an A and things of that nature. And it's like, well, yeah, your kid didn't pass. No one got an A because your kids didn't pass the test. And they were angry about that. And I thought, what a bad example for parents to set for children, of like, you can go and complain your way out of a grade and throw a temper tantrum and then get someone fired because you didn't get what you wanted. And is that the world that we're leaving, that we're saying is okay for people to?
I taught undergrad for for a while, actually. And I can tell you, I had parents calling me about their children's grade. And I was thinking, if my that wasn't even a thing. I mean, the thought of my parents calling a professor of mine, No, it didn't happen. So I think it goes to what I was saying, kind of that psychological immunity. I mean, I was floored the first time I ever had a parent email me questioning me about their kid's grade who's like a junior in college. It was, and every year.
So like 21-year-old person.
Yeah, like I don't even think my parents knew my grades. Like they didn't even know what my classes are, let alone my professor's name. Like what, I didn't even know my professor's name. And so like, I feel like it got progressively worse. Every year it got more and more. And it was mind numbing to me. I could not believe, and I would have students even email me like very disrespectful emails with this sense of entitlement about their grades. And it's like, you never did the project, or, you failed the test, or you'd never come to class. Like what do you expect? And there was this entitlement aspect. And I think that's part of the parents kind of handling things for them. I think that's that lack of accountability. It was very enlightening.
And it's that lack of accountability that just seems to be going out the window.
Mm-hmm.
I was in a discussion with someone the other day, and I was holding their feet to the fire for something. And they wrote back to me in a text message, I've just had a very traumatic year. I'm willing to talk about it. And they have had a traumatic year, and they've been through some really tough stuff. But essentially they were saying, I will only talk if I'm not being talked down to, not being spoken to in this way. And they've screwed something up. And I'm trying to get to the point of like, hey, how can we reconcile this? And they said, well, but I don't want to engage. I've had a very traumatic year. I'm just getting my self-esteem back. And this is a grown adult. And I didn't even respond to the message because I thought to myself, what do I do with that? Like you're trying to say am I blaming you? Am I supposed to feel bad and be like, oh, I'm sorry because you've gone through shit that everyone goes through. You've had health issues. You've had family. Like, I'm sorry that you've had this, but why does that excuse you for not doing what you're supposed to do? And then we can't even talk about it. Like you're shutting down the line of communication just to say that. And I'm like, I don't even know how to respond to this. I didn't respond to it. I'm like, what am I supposed to say? You're clearly saying I don't want to talk or be held accountable for anything. It's very frustrating. And I'm just like, what are we doing? What are we doing? But speaking of that lack of accountability. So did you follow this Lori Vallow Daybell trial? I mean, it just absolutely horrific.
She was sentenced today, right?
She was sentenced on Monday.
On Monday. Okay.
And I think a lot of people were very surprised. Because she spoke for like 10 minutes, and I want to play an excerpt of it, and I want to play my father. But I want to play an excerpt, and I do want to preface this. There are a lot of people that listen to this program that are religious or Christian, and she obviously identifies with Christianity or some version of Latter-day Saints or something like that. And religion was a very big part in these killings and things of that nature, which is just horrific. But a lot of people vilify religion because of this, and I don't, because it's the Bible didn't do this. She did this, and they're psychopaths, right? But she weaponizes this religion in this particular statement, and I wanted to play this just because I just think it's so indicative of the narcissism, and then my father after. But I want to discuss with you if that's all right. So we're gonna pull up this fancy little video here.
Vallow, before I impose sentence, if you choose, you may address the court.
Jesus knows me, and Jesus understands me. I mourn with all of you who mourn, my children and Tammy. Jesus Christ knows the truth of what happened here. Jesus Christ knows that no one was murdered in this case. Accidental deaths happen. Suicides happen. Fatal side effects from medications happen. I have a different perspective in life because in 2002, when I was pregnant with Tylee, I died in the hospital while in labor with her. They tried to stop my labor. They put me on the table and they put something in my IV, and I felt my spirit falling to the floor. I was standing near my pregnant body, watching the doctors try to revive me, which took them a few minutes. In that time, my sister Stacy was standing to my left. I turned to hug her and was surprised that her spirit was as tangible as a physical body, because I knew I was in spirit and she was in spirit. She said she needed to show me some things, and we went to heaven.
So there's a lot there. But I think for me, the thing that struck me is just the absolute, I don't want to use the term crazy, but I do want to use the term just disturbing, is the fact that she is saying that she mourns just like everyone else mourns. Like, she's just made herself the absolute victim.
I mean, yes, I completely agree. And I also, I mean, if you're listening, and I don't know if it's just because like you and I are probably, but this is all we listen for and hear, but
sure.
I mean, that was all about her there. I mean, that, I don't even know, at the end, it didn't even make sense anymore. I mean, it literally was so self-focused, self-absorbed, and having nothing to do with religion. It was just so all about her, the entitlement aspect, the lack of accountability, that her story is the most important thing right now. You have time to speak to everybody in this courtroom, and you choose that, actively choose that. I think that's telling in and of itself. Yeah.
But do you think it's telling of the fact that it's not only about her, but I mean, she believes this while she's saying it. And that's, I think, what is really chilling to me.
Yeah. So, I'm probably going to get yelled at for this, but, we talk about cult followings. We talk about what happens in them. We talk about the brainwashing that happens. We talk about the actual neurological and cognitive changes that happen. So do I believe that she believes this? Yes. Do I use that as an excuse to her doing what she did? No, because there's plenty of people that have very strong religious beliefs that maybe you and I think are like just weird or crazy or whatever you want to call, whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
And that still doesn't excuse violent behavior. It just doesn't. It doesn't excuse abuse. It just doesn't. Just doesn't.
Yeah, and it's interesting. And I have friends that are religious, and they're very religious, and they wouldn't do anything to anyone, and they they lead a life, and they feel very good in that, and they're very loving and accepting people. Yeah. They would never do anything like this, and just to hear her weaponize. And I caught a little bit out because she was reading scripture in the beginning, and I was like, judge not, lest ye be judged, and all this, you know. But I just, it just struck me because in the film Murder in Mansfield, I confront my father, and I read him that letter that I wrote him when I was a child, asking him to confess, and just so I can move on with my life, and so he could move on. Mm-hmm. And he also did the exact same thing. And I want to just also play this little snippet, and then we can talk about this, because and when you say cult, my father was not part of something particularly like that. But when my father is saying these things to me, he believes it with absolute conviction as well, because he's been in his own head, and can someone convince them of themselves? So let me just play this, and we'll discuss. So this refused. Is holding the letter up to him, asking him why.
I can't give you an explanation why I refused that in 1993, but I think it's fair to say I was angry about a lot of things. I was in a spot, probably broken as I could possibly be, low as I could possibly be, away from family and friends. Significant enough that I had considered killing myself. I had considered suicide. But that would not have resolved anything. It would have left you with certainly unanswered questions. I am really sorry that I have caused you so much harm. I honestly am. Every day I'm filled with remorse. It's my own failures, my own bad thinking, all of the really bad lifestyle that I was living.
So, what do you, again, it goes right back to him. I'm a victim.
Mm-hmm. I mean, listen, it's the entitlement aspect and the victim aspect. It's I always say, look at the underlying function, meaning the why, not so much the words being used on the surface, because
Sure.
It's a lot of manipulation or gaslighting. But if you really look at the function of why the behaviors are occurring or what's being said is being said in that moment, I think that it was obvious that, I think he's trying to tug at your heartstrings because he knows that you are a very empathetic and good person. I think that saying that he was in a dark place and he tried to kill himself, but he didn't want to do that because you need answers. You would have been left confused, but then he's not giving you answers anyway, right?
Yeah.
So I think if you listen to the function of it, I think a lot of what he was saying to kind of get you off of the, to try to kind of push you back a little bit.
Yeah. And and a lot of people don't know this, but when he comes into the room in the film, like, he's in a very good mood, and he thinks that I'm literally making a film to help him get out of prison.
Right.
Which
Right.
is just like so bananas to me. I never told him that, but
also when he wrote you the letter that he wanted you to, speak on his behalf.
Yeah.
Remember
absolutely.
again, that was another thing that it just kind of goes along with this, that it's all about how it relates to benefiting them. And we are just kind of objects to, use to get what you need.
How do you combat that? What are some sort of very basic strategies that people can use to recognize this behavior and to avoid it as much as possible?
In other people?
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely hard. And so I think knowing that it's hard is the first thing. Knowing that it hurts is the second thing. Because listen, most people are good people, right? And so we have to acknowledge that this kind of behavior is going to make us upset. But it's very important to understand that it has nothing at all to do with you. Absolutely nothing. You could interchange you with someone else and the same thing would happen. So for people to understand that it has nothing to do with them, usually it's about power, it's about control, it's about manipulating the other person, right? So when you're faced with those kinds of things, that's where boundaries come in. And when we talk, there's been a whole thing about boundaries lately, right? All over social media about the difference between boundaries and rules and all that crap. So when you set a boundary, you want to make sure that the boundary has nothing at all to do with the other person, right? Like, your dad's going to continue to do what your dad has always done. There's nothing you can do to create change in his world. You don't have access to his world. You will never be able to create change in his world. But for you, there's things that you can do so that you can walk away from a situation. And this goes for anybody, not just, but you have to come up with ways to do what you need to do, get what you need to get in the most effective manner so that you can walk away feeling at ease, feeling at peace, knowing you did everything that you possibly can. And boundaries also they fluctuate, right? And they change based on your mood and how you feel. And so that's how they're different than rules. But with boundaries, it can be anything from, for example, somebody saying, you telling somebody, I'm not going to talk to you anymore if you continue to scream at me. So they start talking normally again, but then they start screaming. And so you don't respond. That had nothing to do, they're going to keep screaming, right? But you set a boundary so that you are letting them know what you're willing to accept and what you're not willing to accept, how you're willing to be treated and how you're not willing to be treated. And then it's up to you to maintain that consistency, because the worst thing you can do is set inconsistent boundaries, right? Because then you get that back and forth and you actually end up creating more of the behavior you're trying to stop. So if somebody's screaming at you and you say, I'm not going to talk to you, and so you don't, but then the next time they scream, you continue to argue with them, they're just going to scream more and more and more. So you have to make sure they're consistent, but it is never to change the other person's behavior. It's for you to be able to walk away or be in that situation feeling as in control as you possibly can. And if we wait for other people's behaviors and wait for their responses in order to feel in control, we never are going to be in control, right? Like, because we can't control anybody else, what they say, what they think, their internal workings, but we can control ourselves. And so you need to figure out the best way to give that to yourself. And that's by changing your own behavior.
Sage advice. Absolutely.
That's my long-winded answer.
No, I mean, but but absolutely, you got to kind of shift your perspective and get out as gracefully as you can, right? Because at the end of the relationship with the narcissist is when it ends up really becoming the nastiest, right?
Yes, at the end of the relationship, the post-separation, because they now know that you see them. And when you truly see a narcissist and their behaviors and you see that blueprint, because once you see that blueprint, you can't ever unsee it, right? Once you see you start connecting the dots and you figure out the patterns, you're never going to unsee it. And so when a narcissist realizes that you see them, that part of you that they don't want anyone to see, once they know that you know them, that's when they will do anything they possibly can to make sure that they maintain that power over you. Because as soon as you leave or you figure them out, that's where they lose control over you. Right at that moment, when they see that that you figured them out, they lose control. And that doesn't mean they still can't, do things and say things and upset you, but ultimately they lost control, which is why they then go for other things to do, like go after the children, drag you through family court, smear your character all over town, and post pictures with their new boyfriend or girlfriend immediately on social media. So they find things to still get at you. But the reason why they're doing that is because they know that and that they have lost control over you. They can't do anything now to hurt you. And that's where you get the rage. And that's, that's where you get the just, trying to destroy you in a sense so that people don't believe you. They try to ruin your credibility so that no one will believe you.
Yeah, it's a smear campaign, right?
Yep. And they, and listen, like they use their friends, they use the people that don't see that side of them, right? They try to make you sound like you're the crazy one. You have a mental health problem, you have a drug problem, you're unstable. And their friends around them will support those opinions and they will spread the word for them. So it's very tricky. It's very hard to not be bothered by that. But I tell people, never, ever, ever try to correct the smear campaign. That is exactly what they want. And you'll end up, by trying to do that, prolonging it, making it worse. You really just, you want to, as hard as it may be, not defend it.
Yeah, absolutely. And they embarrass you. Or they try to.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And speaking of embarrassing moments, somebody wrote here, by the way, I recently saw Collier's music video. Collier, you have such a beautiful voice, a very good video. I did this music video. Thank you so much. I worked with Billy Ray Cyrus on one of my first music videos 8 years ago. And he gave me a song and I made it into a music video and recomposed it for guitar and voice for this project that I was doing at the time.
I'm gonna have to watch it.
And it's apparently still out on YouTube, and it's like I've got. Oh, it's so funny. Somebody found it. They're like, "Hey,
it's
check
amazing.
this I got to do another one. I got to do something much better than that because we did that like over the course of like a day and on no sleep. And we were doing it traveling through the desert and the whole project. But anyways, Dr. Jamie Zuckerman, thank you so much for joining the program. So really fast, a couple of questions for you.
Yeah.
Genos or Pats?
Genos.
Genos. Like no, and then do we do, is it Whiz? Is that?
Whiz.
Whiz.
Whiz-wit.
Whiz-wit. Okay, so for those that are not in the Philadelphia area, what are we talking about? What is
Like,
this language we're speaking?
Whiz, cheese whiz. And
Yes.
you want cheese whiz on your cheesesteak because there's no other way to eat it at all. Ever.
And I completely disagree, but that's okay.
What?
I can't do it. I told you I'm a provolone guy. Like my mother always got me, and we used to get. There's a place in Ardmore called Eagle Pizza, and we used to go to Eagle Pizza. I used to go with my grandfather actually, and we would get cheesesteaks from there, and they would put provolone on them. So I'm a provolone guy.
I get extra sides of whiz. That's how much I believe in that.
Oh, that's so funny. Butterscotch cakes or the candy cakes?
Butterscotch.
Butterscotch, those are my mom's favorite too. This is a
Butterscotch.
tasty cake that we're referring to.
Yep, you rub the top so that it doesn't stick on the paper. And when you take it out, there's a whole method.
It's a pro tip, right? And I recently was going through some photos that I was going to put on my Patreon. And about like 4 years, I guess 2018, I was filming in Independence Hall with like our own private security. It was after hours. It was really, really cool. And then we went over to Liberty Bell and we filmed. And as everyone was cleared out, I went and touched the Liberty Bell, which is a big no-no. Mm-hmm. But I found a photograph of myself as a child with my hand on the Liberty Bell. So I've officially touched the Liberty Bell twice. How many times have you touched the Liberty Bell?
None that I remember, but that doesn't mean I didn't. No, I definitely don't have a memory of that either way. So I can't answer that.
Oh, all right.
I actually don't even know the last time I've seen the Liberty Bell, to be honest with you. Like a 4th grade field trip. It's so bad.
Oh, that's funny. Well, I was there right after y'all won the Super Bowl, so you guys were whole town was just going crazy. Still,
that was fun.
A month later. Yeah, that was good fun. My guest today is Dr. Jamie Zuckerman, or Dr. Z Psychologist. How can my audience find you?
I'm on Instagram, Dr. Z Psychologist, and TikTok, and my website's drjamiezuckerman.com.
Fantastic. Hey, we made it through all the technical difficulties.
Oh man, yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's fantastic. Thank you so much for
thank you
for joining the program. I greatly appreciate it. Anytime. And I will have links to all of Dr. Z's links to her website and her link tree in the show notes of today's episode. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I want to give a special shout out to all of my channel members, all my channel subscribers, all my Patreon members. Without you guys, this channel, this podcast would not be possible. So thank you so much for your support, just like you were supporting NPR, which is one of my favorite stations in the world. Of course, KCRW 89.9 right behind me at Santa Monica College. But in all seriousness, thank you so much. Your contributions and your support of this program and just sharing it with others listening. Please leave me a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts if you would be so kind. And remember to like and subscribe. Click that button right below and click the bell for alerts. I greatly appreciate it. All your support helps me to bring wonderful guests like Dr. Jamie Zuckerman to the program and give you guys just this amazing wealth of knowledge that somebody like her brings to the world of narcissism and mental health in general. So on that note, I'm Collier Landry, and this is Moving Past Trauma. Thanks, y'all.
This podcast is made possible by support from listeners just like you. For exclusive content around this podcast, please consider supporting me via Patreon by going to collierlandry.com/support. Please subscribe via Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts from, and please leave us a 5-star review. If you want to see video episodes of this podcast, please check out my YouTube channel at youtube.com/collierlandry. You can find links to additional resources in the show notes of today's episode. This podcast is a production of Don't Touch My Radio. Copyright Collier Landry.